Fall, 1996. Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum had saved Earth from the alien invaders of Independence Day. Los Del Rio invited everyone to dance to the remixed version of the Macarena, and gamers were being treated to the first generation of 3D console games. Titles such as Super Mario 64, Resident Evil, and Tomb Raider would go on to revolutionize the way we played video games forever. On November 9th of that same year, a 16-year-old high school junior had a vision for a website. He wanted to bring back the games of the past, a desire to play video games in a way that was not originally intended, when physical media and moving parts had failed. He wanted to bring emulation to the world and shout it from the rooftops. Join us for a look at the history of retro gaming emulation through the eyes of the founder of Zophar's domain.
Before we even get into the whole nesticle speedrun contest stuff of the 90s, just wanted to give you a little bit of background on how I got into speedrunning in the first place and why the idea of contests that would allow players to show off how quickly they could beat a game was so appealing to me. So we'd have to go all the way back to 1996, same year as Zophar's domain was founded. So I had my Sega Saturn, and there was a game that came out called Shining Wisdom, which was published, translated by Working Designs. They were, pretty big back in the 90s when it came to translating and localizing RPGs for Sega consoles. And they had a contest where the grand prize winner, would get $10,000 if you beat the game the fastest time possible with the highest percentage of items gathered. So I said, oh, that sounds like fun. I could probably do that. So this is the Shining Wisdom game we're talking about here for the Sega Saturn, my original 1996 childhood copy. You can see right here, it says, win $10,000 right up here. And I was like, whoa, man, leet. Like, I want to win $10,000. That coupled with the fact that it had the Working Designs logo on it, I was like, I'm there. Prior to that, there was Lunar 2, Vi, and Popful Mail for the Sega CD. I owned them all, loved all those games. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna buy this. So I played the game, and I managed to get 100%. In something like 21 or 22 hours. It was actually really terrible. And the reason that happened is because I left the game on overnight, didn't realize it was on, and then when I woke up the next day, I just kept playing it, not thinking of what I was doing, and when I got to the end and I realized I had never turned it off and reloaded the save, I was like, oh crap, I gotta do it again. So I tried to do it again, and the next time I got like a time of, had to be under 3 hours. It was really fast, but it was 99%. I missed an item and I couldn't figure out where the item was. So I just submitted both of them, and I ended up winning the contest for the runners-up, which was the top 100 runners-up would get a Shining Wisdom poster. So this is the poster that I won for being in the top 100 runners-up for fastest time with highest item completion in Shining Wisdom. They ended up accepting my 21, 22-hour horrible time because it was 100%. So apparently, even though there were people much, much, much faster, not everyone was able to get 100% of all the items.
But I managed to do it.
So ultimately, the grand prize winner of Shining Wisdom, $10,000 prize, was Mickey Shannon. And at the time on Working Design's website, they asked him a bunch of questions about, how's it feel to win, and what are you going to do with your $10,000? I think he said he was going to buy a few more RPGs and then put the rest towards college. And I always wondered what happened to Mickey Shannon after that. Like, did he go on to, do some more speedruns, or what did he end up doing? And I actually asked the question on X just a few hours before shooting because I just wanted to know, like, what happened to him? And it turns out, you ever hear of the websites LunarNET or maybe RPGFan? Well, guess what? Mickey Shannon founded both of those. LunarNET and RPGFan was created by Mickey Shannon in the late 90s after he won the Shining Wisdom contest. And those were both sites that I frequented, and they're both around today, and RPGFan in particular is constantly updated. So Mickey Shannon, congratulations again, my friend. I hope you enjoyed the $10,000. So many years removed from the emulation days of the 90s, someone on my Twitch stream had actually challenged me to attempt to get a world record in virtual Hydlide. They're like, hey, Zophar, no one has the world record for blah, blah category. So if you do it, you'll win by default. This is my original 1995 copy right here. As you can see, the case is completely destroyed. But I played the heck out of this game. I loved this game. It's short, it's sweet, and I ended up speedrunning it, about a year and change, a little over a year ago from this point.
Gyre speedruns this. Is not actually the worst game. Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, more. That, like, I would love to speedrun this one day if I ever did a speedrun. But Gyre kind of has us all locked up. I mean, what is his world record, like 39 minutes or something? No way! World record! What the He never moved! He never moved! We just did it!
So I'm sure a lot of you are wondering at this point, like, why didn't we just use capture cards to, record our videos? Well, what's this whole controller input format thing? Like, what are we talking about? So you got to put yourself back in the realm of the 90s. In 1998 and 1999, bandwidth was not easy to come by. It was very expensive to, host so many files of such a certain size using such an amount of bandwidth. ISPs, internet service providers, would charge you per megabyte, per gigabyte of data. Like, it got very expensive. So what the Nesticle NSM format was it was a file that would start off with a save state. In other words, all of the contents of the Nintendo Entertainment System's RAM in memory, whatever the state of the game was, which would be at the beginning of the game, the state is saved. And then from that point, it would record every single frame of whatever controller input you were doing, up, down, left, right, start, select, nothing, hold, whatever you were doing, it was recording the inputs. And so you would wind up with a file that was much smaller than an AVI or an MOV, because all it is a save state file with controller inputs. So you could have an hour-long Faxanadu speedrun, and the file itself would be, less than a megabyte. Around the same time, a little bit before the Zophar's Domain NSM contest, you had a site known as Speed Demos Archive, which at the time in 1998, it was founded to basically be an archive of Quake speedruns. And again, the word speedrun wasn't really around back then, so they were demos, right? Speed Demo Archive, and they were essentially the same idea. They were files that would save the state of wherever you were in the RAM of Quake on your PC, and then it would log all of the inputs. And if I recall, that was in DZ format, was the popular format. DZIP, which was a compression and decompression format that was specifically originally designed for the Quake demo files that would house your speedruns. And that site then later expanded. I want to say it was maybe 2004, where other games besides Quake were accepted. But Speed Demo Archives is the earliest example I can think of, and it wasn't too far removed from the Zophar's Domain NSM contest, less than a year apart. So in 1999, I had this idea. There were other emulators out by that point besides Nesticle. Nestin was a popular one. No Friendo. There were a whole bunch of Nintendo emulators that at that point had become more advanced than Nesticle. But only Nesticle had that really easy to use NSM format of recording movies, essentially, of your gameplay, of your game runs. So I said, why don't we have a contest? And again, remember, the word speedrun didn't really exist at that point that I was aware of. So I said, why don't we have a contest, thinking again back to 96 with the Shine and Wisdom contest. Why don't we have a contest, and we can maybe have this be like every month or every couple of months, where we challenge the Zophar's Domain emulation community to play a game as quickly as possible, and they could win prizes. The prizes were nothing huge, like one of them was like a check from Zophar. Another one was you could get Final Fantasy VII used, my old Final Fantasy VII PC game that came in the triangular box, if you remember that one. And, you get a certain amount of criteria, like you can submit up to 3 NSMs, I think the first couple contests allowed you to do. Really interestingly on this was that I frowned upon what I considered at the time cheating. I totally don't hold this view anymore, just to be clear. But back then, things like in Faxanadu, I would say, you can't do the go back to the king and get 1,500 gold multiple times. That's cheating. That was what I said, and that's how I felt in 1999. I totally don't feel that way now. In fact, I speedran Faxanadu before, and I'm not a world record holder there. There's far better people like Bogle Dowdy and Shiner and Songbird, they're far, far more talented than me there. But, part of the speedrun strategy today is, glitches or exploits, and that's one of them, where if you get your goal down 1,500 to 0, you can keep going back to the king and get a whole bunch of stuff. But again, like back then, I viewed that as cheating. Same with things like the Metroid door glitch, where you can go up or down levels if you keep, going down, up, down, up, down, up. All that stuff I viewed as cheating, and now you would just call it a glitchless would be the category. But again, I didn't know there was no speedrun.com. We didn't call it that. It was just beat the game as fast as you can and don't cheat. Don't use exploits, right? So we're talking about our ideas for the Zophar's Domain NSM contest, and on April 15th, 1999, I said, "So Alamone, check ZD about my NSM idea." 30 people emailed in, every single one positive. They all said they'd love it. And Alamone said, "NSM contest?" And I said, "It's the perfect way to get awesome NSMs. Imagine seeing Zelda 1 and 2, games like that." And, we talked about what the prizes would be. Alamone suggested a stale lollipop from his basement because he didn't have any money. So I said, I'll offer like $10 prizes or something. Alamone then suggested, "Hey, Zophar, someone did beat Zelda without a sword." I remember the whole no sword Zelda run that started back then.
So when Alamone told me that someone had beaten Legend of Zelda without a sword, I thought, oh wow, we gotta check this out. And Alamone had a script that he used to parse through the files, so up it went onto the NSM archive. And this gentleman by the name of Scott Conrad VanderWoude essentially had multiple versions of him beating the Legend of Zelda without a sword for the different versions of Nesticle that would come out, because sometimes the CPU core, the timing would change, and it would render all previous NSMs or save states completely useless, because what would happen is they would desync or they wouldn't load in the right spot due to those timing differences. So I'm sitting here thinking, there's no way he's getting to Ganon without a sword. I mean, I played this game, it took me months to beat it when I was 8. I mean, they take you to the very first screen, and going north into the cave, you get the whole, it's dangerous to go alone, take this. Like, they're begging you to take the sword. And so here he is in the first frames of the run. He goes up to the old man, and then he's like, "Ha-ha, I'm not taking that sword, you jerk." And he proceeds to do something that I had no idea was possible, which is go through the entire game, going through all the levels, collecting nearly all the items to the point at which he reaches Ganon and doesn't actually finish the game, because it turns out you can't beat Ganon without a sword. That's the kicker. But you can get all the way up to Ganon without a sword. You require at least the white sword to be able to damage him. So he employs some interesting techniques to get more rupees in the game. For example, he'll go play the money-making game, and every time he wins, he'll save, and every time he loses, he'll retry with the whole, second controller reset save trick. And, he'll do interesting things when he's fighting enemies, like he'll try to take out multiple Pols voices maybe with one arrow. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. He would get really creative with the wand and, trying to hit multiple enemies with the fire that would come out of it when he got the book. But ultimately, after he got all the way up to Ganon, he goes back for his medicine, he grabs the blue ring, and he destroys Ganon with the white sword and a perfectly shot arrow. I always thought it was kind of funny how he left exactly 1 rupee to do it. Show off. But ultimately, he does save Hyrule, and peace returns to the land. The end.
And so we're trying to figure out, is the NSM format the right format for this contest? And Alamone said that, they would work well. They don't desync like ZSTs, which I think he meant ZMVs, the ZSNS movie format. So I said, Alamone, okay, so for the contest, we should start ASAP. What should we do for the first contest? And there were a whole bunch of different ideas. Ray J said Mega Man 1 through 6. Some people, I thought maybe Legend of Zelda Quest 1 would be a good idea. And Alamone goes, hell, I'm not verifying the entries. And I said, there's not going to be any cheating. You can't use any Game Genie codes or anything like that. How would we verify them is what Alamone asked. Remember, Alamone was the save state and movie archive maintainer at the time. So I said, you watch it from the beginning and you'll know if they cheat. And he said, yeah, I'm not going to watch through all these dumb movies. So and now, of course, you could very easily, it's much easier to verify this stuff. But there wasn't a lot of options in terms of fast forwarding and that kind of stuff at that point. So I said, maybe we'll just have a timer or something, or just look at this file size. And so we're sitting there just trying to figure out what would make the most sense. So ultimately, we decided on Metroid. Metroid is a game that was one of the first Nintendo games I actually ever played, besides Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt and Legend of Kage, which I used to think was Legend of Cage, by the way. That's how I used to pronounce it. But in any case, Metroid was the third video game for Nintendo that I ever owned and ever played back in 1988. My mom got it at the Sears catalog purchase. And, I had never beaten that game without cheating up until that point. I had always used the Justin Bailey code or Narcus Sword. So I wanted to see someone beat that game as quickly as possible. And so that's what we chose. Ultimately, Blazemore, who's still around today, by the way, Blazemore actually won that contest. And then we had a few others after that. We had Castlevania 2 as our second contest, which I actually have right over here. This is another game that I absolutely loved as a kid. I personally think that Castlevania 2 is the best Castlevania.
This game sucks.
A lot of people, think this is kind of the dark horse of the Castlevania series, but I loved it. I thought it was a great game, very well done, very different from most of the others, and I think it set the stage for what was to come with the Metroidvania series. And this is a game that I had beaten, but I wanted to see how quickly someone could do this. So that was the second contest, and that was ultimately won by Chris Sand. I actually have right here. Chris's time was 47 minutes and 56 seconds, and Blazemore's time for Metroid for fastest time was 42 minutes and 50 seconds. So I can tell you that the competition at this point was pretty fierce amongst the speedrunners. And in one particular one, Ghosts and Goblins, because that is a notoriously difficult game to beat. I actually myself completed it for the first time just a couple of months ago after much rage and screaming and throwing controllers, but I finally did manage to beat it. But back then, the concept of me beating that game was just, I knew there was no chance. So I wanted to see someone, talent that could actually do it. So the competition was really fierce, and when I announced the winner of Ghosts and Goblins, on IRC, there was a lot of debate about it. So in August of 1999, we have Pibman, who had submitted an NSM. And Pibman says, "Oh man, this is total BS. Take a look at the G&G thing." And I said, "Pibman, what's wrong?" He said, "And then look at mine." And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Nothing. I didn't win fair." And I said, "You didn't win fair?" And Pibman says, No, take a look at it if you get a chance. I lost one life, so I didn't win fair and square. But take a look at mine just to see what a man who's had the game since 1986 can do." And I said, "Well, you lost a life and he didn't, so..." And Pibman said, "Oh, well, I'll win the next contest." So close to, if only I hadn't gotten cocky and shot that red devil. I didn't need to. It was pretty crazy, the competition, and people were really into it. And there were a lot of great submissions, but in the end, there can be only one, right? The fourth contest was Faxanadu. This is my all-time favorite Nintendo game. I think this game is a masterpiece, great action RPG. A lot of people haven't heard of it, but highly recommend if you're into retro, pick this up. This game is so worth it. And the soundtrack's absolutely haunting. I had beaten this game a whole bunch of times up to the point of the Zophar's Domain contest, but I wanted to see how quickly someone could do this. So, we had that contest, and ultimately it was Boars that won that one. And then the final contest we ever did was for Solstice. That was a game I never had played before, but I had seen others play it, and I knew it was extremely difficult, and it had a reputation for being a really tough game if you didn't know what to do. And so ultimately, that was the final contest, and that was Dalamar who won that with a time of 9 minutes and 49 seconds. So, we ended up with that total of 5 NSM contests that showcased people's, abilities. But the whole idea behind this was to create interest in the Nesticle NSM format, get people, trying to beat games quickly, or maybe just showing off cool tricks, or with the least deaths, which would allow people to submit those NSMs to the Zophar's Domain archive. So really, if you think about this was fun, but it was also kind of a way to get people to submit NSMs and bring awareness to the NSM format. And I'm proud of that archive of what we accomplished there. It grew. We have To this day on Zophar's domain, there's a lot of NSM files there that even though you wouldn't necessarily consider them, world record speedruns at this point, there's far faster and better times now on much more accurate emulators or on original hardware. I think there's some really cool stuff to see in the 90s in those runs, and maybe one day we'll convert more of them over, to a modern video format and get them up on YouTube. So ultimately, the Nesticle NSM format went the way of the dodo. It obsoleted because effectively computer speeds got faster, so you were able to use capture cards without worrying about processor usage being bogged down. In addition to the fact that more server space was available, more bandwidth was available. You didn't have to worry about paying astronomical costs for now what would be considered tiny amounts of broadband being used. And ultimately people switched over. Speed Demos Archive, started just accepting actual movies of things, and then ultimately Speedrun.com got really popular, and now people just have Twitch streams or YouTube videos of their speedruns. So the Nesticle format is no longer necessary, but it was a really cool moment in time where we had a problem: server space, bandwidth, processor usage, and it was a really creative way of coming up with a solution to that problem. So at the time we were doing the Zophar's Domain NSM contests, the concept of TASes, or tool-assisted speedruns, wasn't really a thing that was talked about. I didn't even know what a TAS was at that point. No one called them that. But when we were discussing what the next contest after Ghosts and Goblins would be, and I'll read from this log here, and August 9th of 1999, we were talking about what the next contest would be, and Swapfile said, "I got a cool way to make fake NSMs, but I'll only use my power for good." And Barberry replied, "Swapfile, I've been wanting to figure out how to hack Nesticle to work with saved states in NSMs." And he replied with, "I make fake NSMs by an app I got that can feed keys to another application, like a huge batch file, like press start, hold left for 4 seconds, etc." So, unfortunately, nothing came of this conversation. I wasn't, knowledgeable enough in 1999 to ask more about that, like, what are you talking about? And of course, looking back on that now, as I was doing research for this episode of Zophar's Retro Rewind, I'm reading that and I'm saying, whoa, he's talking about making a TAS. That's exactly what he was talking about. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened to Swapfile. So Swapfile, if you're watching this and you're out there, I'd love to chat with you more about, what came of that, what you ended up doing. And, for all we know, Swapfile is a really popular TAS speedrunner creator. But the idea of TASes was that it would use emulation and debugging software and utilities to allow you to modify and create a speedrun, essentially artificially, right? With controller inputs that may not be possible by a human, but you can tell the game, hey, left and right are being held at the same time, and maybe since the game doesn't expect you to be able to do that, you wind up with scenarios of, moving real quick through a level, or speeding across in a way the game didn't intend, or maybe fast acceleration. That's what a TAS would allow you to do. So, again, here was a person talking in our IRC chat about that very aspect, about TASes, before anybody knew even what it was. Now, there's one more thing. There was a format called LSMM, I think it was. I don't even remember what it stands for, but it was a standardized Nesticle movie format type file. So the idea would be that, you would have this format, no matter what emulator you were playing on, it would work. It would not desync. You wouldn't have to worry about, I recorded it on this emulator in this version. It would just be a standardized format. So a big problem with the NSM format was, number one, Nesticle was no longer being updated. 1998 was the last release, and Nintendo emulators had come a long way since then. More mappers were being supported, graphical glitches were being worked out, timing was changing, and Nesticle was kind of left out to dry. And you had all these NSMs. What are you going to do with them now? And what are you going to continue to record them on an old emulator that's not updated anymore? So This was an attempt to find a solution to that problem by saying, hey, this is the format we're going to support, and all the emulators are going to start supporting this, and we won't have to worry about, what version did you record it on. Even with our own contests to this day, if you want to watch those speedruns in Nesticle, 1, 2, 3, and 5, you have to use x.xx. Yes, that was a version number from Nesticle. And then the 4th speedrun, which is Faxanadu, you had to use version 0.42. If you don't do that, at some point the speedrun will desync, like if you try to use Faxanadu on a different version, and the game will you'll be like, why is the dude just sitting there? Why is the game paused? Or wait, he died. What's happening? So this was supposed to be the solve to that. But unfortunately, it never really took off. I'm not really sure why. Alamone was the one who worked this out with the No Friendo emulator author. And I don't have an answer for him.
Has Zophar retired from speedrunning?
I would not say that I've retired from speedrunning. I absolutely have taken a little bit of a break, but virtual Hydlide continues to call my name. I can't stay away from it. There's still 3 more categories out of 8 that I don't hold that I would love to keep trying to take a crack at as time permits. And I know the Faxanadu speedrunning community continues to ask me to this day if I'll start speedrunning it again. I don't have talent, by the way, just to be clear. The reason I hold world records in virtual Hydlide is because there's only a few of us that run that game, because it's a very different kind of game. Faxanadu has far, far more talented runners than myself. But I would like to get back to that, and maybe some other games too. Again, I do it for fun. I don't consider myself a speedrunner. But I definitely would not say that you've seen the last of Zophar's speedrunning domain.
Next time on Zophar's Retro Rewind. What happens when disc repair kits fail your aging Sega CD? And blowing on your NES cartridges produces no picture? You arrived at the dawn of a new era, as retro gaming websites began to take hold during the golden age of the internet. Enter the genesis of sites such as Archaic Ruins, Node 99, and Zophar's Domain. ROMs would be hacked. Gamers showed no fear. The code had been cracked. Emulation was here.
So I was funky. Damn, is there a way to splice this together? Okay, so that was totally wrong. The first game was in Metroid. Castlevania 2 was the second game.
Don't use the Castlevania one.
You took too fucking long, now I forget everything. By just recording the state of the game in memory when you start the movie. So in other words, you would take a save state. Stop. So ultimately, we decided on the Metroid. The idea was NSM format would let you. I don't like that. We're gonna have a fun time splicing this together. Sorry, I'm being so disjointed here. We might decide to pull some of it. And there were a lot of great submissions, but in the end, there can be only one. Just content, right? Content, see what works, throw it in, and then we can triple it. If I say the wrong here, I will look dumb. Should I be recording this now? I'm actually talking. Can we start, please?